The silence was deafening. Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, feeling the vibrations of distant explosions through the crumbling structure. His radio crackled with static, then nothing. They were completely cut off. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What had started as a routine reconnaissance mission in the abandoned industrial district of Kandahar province had become a nightmare. Now, with hostiles closing in from every direction and his team's ammunition running dangerously low, Marcus faced the most critical decision of his military career. One shot. That's all it would take to change everything. But let me take you back to where this all began. 3 weeks earlier, the 2nd Battalion had received intelligence about suspicious activity in Sector 7, an abandoned manufacturing complex that had been dormant since the Soviet withdrawal decades ago. The area was supposedly clear, marked as low priority on every tactical map. Intelligence suggested it was nothing more than scavengers picking through industrial scrap. Marcus had been stationed at Forward Operating Base Phoenix for 8 months. At 28, he was already a veteran of 2 deployments, known among his peers for his methodical approach and steady nerves under pressure. His squad respected him, not because he was the loudest or most aggressive, but because he brought everyone home. The team assembled for the mission consisted of 5 specialists. There was Corporal Jake Morrison, a communications expert from Denver, whose quick wit kept morale high during the longest patrols. Private First Class Elena Rodriguez served as their medic, a former EMT from Phoenix who could patch up anything from a scraped knee to a gunshot wound. Specialist Derek Chun handled explosives and breaching, his engineering background making him invaluable for navigating the complex infrastructure they often encountered. Finally, Private Tommy Walsh, barely 21 and fresh from advanced marksmanship training in Georgia, served as their designated marksman. The briefing had been straightforward. Colonel Bradley Harrison, a career officer with silver hair and weathered hands, spread the aerial photographs across the metal table in the operations tent. The images showed a sprawling complex of warehouses, manufacturing buildings, and administrative structures connected by a network of roads and rail lines. "Your job is simple," Harrison had said, tapping the photos with his index finger. "Get in, assess what's actually happening in Sector 7, document any suspicious activity, and get out. Intelligence estimates suggest minimal hostile presence, if any. This should be a walk in the park." Marcus studied the photographs carefully. Something about the layout bothered him, though he couldn't articulate exactly what. The buildings were arranged in a way that created natural choke points and defensive positions. For an abandoned complex, it seemed remarkably well preserved in the satellite imagery. "Sir, what's the extraction timeline?" Marcus asked. 48 hours maximum. You'll insert at dawn, conduct your reconnaissance, and radio for pickup at the designated landing zone. The weather forecast is clear, no complications expected. The night before departure, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He walked the perimeter of the base, reviewing every detail of their mission plan. Something felt off, but he attributed it to pre-mission nerves. Every soldier experienced them, regardless of experience level. Elena found him near the communications tower, staring out at the dark mountains that surrounded their position. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, settling beside him on an empty ammunition crate. "Just running through the checklist," Marcus replied. "This one feels different somehow." "Different? How?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Intelligence has been wrong before. Remember the abandoned village near Helmand that turned out to be a major staging area?" Elena nodded. "That mission had cost them 2 good soldiers and nearly resulted in their entire squad being overrun. You think this is similar?" "I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it." But Elena knew Marcus well enough to trust his instincts. What's your gut telling you? That we should be prepared for anything. Dawn came quickly. The helicopter lifted off from Phoenix Base as the first rays of sunlight painted the mountains in shades of gold and orange. The flight to Sector 7 would take 37 minutes, giving them time to review their equipment and run through final communications checks. Jake tested the radio frequencies, confirming clear channels back to base. Derek verified his breaching charges and electronic detection equipment. Elena organized her medical supplies, ensuring everything was easily accessible. Tommy cleaned his rifle scope for the third time, a nervous habit that had become ritual. Marcus watched the landscape pass below them. The terrain transitioned from the rocky outcroppings near their base to the flatter, industrial region surrounding Sector 7. As they approached the landing zone, he could see the complex more clearly than the satellite photos had revealed. The buildings were indeed in better condition than expected. Too good, perhaps, for a facility that had supposedly been abandoned for years. Fresh tire tracks were visible in the dirt roads between structures, and what appeared to be recent construction. Materials were stacked near several warehouses. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. LZ coming up in 2 minutes. Looks quiet down there, but stay sharp, Marcus acknowledged and signaled to his team. They conducted final equipment checks and prepared for insertion. The helicopter settled into the designated clearing, rotors, whipping dust and debris into small tornadoes around the aircraft. 48 hours, the pilot called as they disembarked. Same spot, same time. The helicopter lifted away, leaving them alone in the complex. The sudden silence was striking after the constant noise of the rotors. Marcus immediately established a defensive perimeter and consulted his map. Morrison, establish comms with base. Rodriguez, medical check on everyone. Chun, I want those motion detectors deployed in a 50-meter radius. Walsh, overwatch position on that water tower. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they had transformed from passengers to a functioning reconnaissance unit. Jake confirmed radio contact with Phoenix Base. Elena verified that everyone was healthy and ready. Derek's motion sensors showed no immediate movement in their vicinity. Tommy had climbed the water tower and reported clear sight lines in all directions. Sector 7 appears abandoned as advertised, Marcus radioed back to base. Beginning systematic reconnaissance of primary structures. They moved toward the first warehouse, a massive steel and concrete building that dominated the northern section of the complex. The main doors were secured with heavy chains, but Derek quickly identified a loading dock with a damaged rolling door that would provide easier access. Inside, the warehouse was largely empty, but not entirely. Fresh footprints in the dust suggested recent activity, and Elena discovered several areas where the concrete floor had been recently cleaned. More troubling, Jake's electronic scanner detected residual traces of chemical compounds consistent with explosive materials. This doesn't feel abandoned, Elena whispered as they methodically searched the building. Derek found evidence of recent electrical work near the main power distribution panel. Someone had installed new wiring within the past few months, possibly weeks. The installation was professional, not the work of casual scavengers. They photographed everything, documenting the evidence for their report. Marcus made detailed notes about the layout, potential defensive positions, and anything that seemed inconsistent with an abandoned facility. The second building yielded similar findings. Recent activity, professional-grade modifications, and signs of ongoing maintenance. By the time they reached the third structure, a pattern was emerging that made Marcus increasingly uncomfortable. Base, this is Recon Team Alpha, he radioed. Sector 7 shows significant signs of recent occupation and modification. Recommend reassessment of threat level. The response was immediate. Copy that, Alpha. Continue reconnaissance as planned. Additional intelligence suggests activity may be related to salvage operations by local contractors. Marcus wasn't convinced. But orders were orders. They pressed deeper into the complex, moving systematically from building to building. Each structure told the same story: recent activity, professional modifications, and evidence of ongoing operations. It was Tommy who first spotted the vehicles. From his elevated position in the administrative building, he had a clear view across the central courtyard. 3 military-style trucks were parked behind a maintenance shed, concealed from aerial observation by carefully positioned camouflage netting. "Sergeant, we've got vehicles." 3 trucks, military configuration, hidden behind Building 7. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Salvage contractors didn't use military vehicles or employ sophisticated camouflage techniques. This was something else entirely. "All teams converge on my position. We need to reassess our situation." As his squad regrouped, Marcus studied the tactical situation. They were deep inside a complex that was clearly not abandoned, surrounded by buildings that could conceal significant hostile forces with their extraction point over a kilometer away across open ground. Jake attempted to raise Phoenix Base for updated orders, but the radio produced only static. The mountains that provided natural protection for their forward operating base were now blocking their communications signal. "We're on our own until we can reach higher ground," Jake reported. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Derek's motion sensors began registering movement on multiple vectors. At first, the Kangza readings were sporadic and distant, possibly wildlife or wind-blown debris. But the pattern quickly became more organized and purposeful. "Contact," Derek announced quietly. Multiple sources, approaching from the east and south. Marcus climbed to the second floor of their current position and used his binoculars to scan the surrounding area. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Armed figures were moving systematically between the buildings, advancing in coordinated fashion toward their position. These weren't scavengers or contractors. This was a well-organized hostile force that had been using Sector 7 as a base of operations, and his team had walked directly into their operational area. The hostiles moved with military precision, using proper cover and advanced techniques. They clearly knew the layout of the complex intimately and were using that knowledge to their advantage. Marcus counted at least 12 individuals, but the building layout made it impossible to get an accurate assessment of total enemy strength. "How many rounds does everyone have?" he asked quietly. The inventory was sobering. Between the 5 of them, they had fewer than 200 rounds of ammunition total. Standard loadout for a reconnaissance mission, but woefully inadequate for a sustained firefight against a numerically superior force. Elena checked her medical supplies. 2 trauma kits, basic antibiotics, and enough morphine for 1 serious casualty. Derek had 3 breaching charges and a variety of electronic equipment, but nothing that would help in direct combat. Jake's radio equipment was functioning, but they needed elevation or a clear line of sight to Phoenix Base to establish contact. Tommy's sniper rifle represented their most significant tactical advantage. With 43 rounds of match-grade ammunition and a high-powered scope, he could engage targets at distances far beyond what the hostiles' assault rifles could effectively reach. The first shots came from the eastern approach. Rifle rounds struck the concrete walls of their building, sending chips of debris flying through the air. Marcus immediately ordered his team to defensive positions. Morrison, try to reach the base from the roof. Rodriguez, set up a casualty collection point on the ground floor. Chun, I want those charges ready in case we need to create our own exit. Walsh, find the best shooting position and start thinning their numbers. The building they occupied was a 3-story administrative structure with thick concrete walls and narrow windows that provided excellent defensive positions. However, it also represented a potential trap if the hostiles could surround it completely. Tommy moved to the third floor and identified targets through his scope. His first shot dropped a hostile who had been attempting to advance across the courtyard. The sound of the rifle echoed through the complex, and the enemy advance immediately became more cautious. "One down," Tommy reported. "They're spreading out, using better cover now." Marcus coordinated the defense from the second floor, where he could observe multiple approaches and direct his team's actions. The hostiles were clearly experienced fighters, but they had expected to find his team unprepared and caught off guard. Jake managed to establish brief contact with Phoenix Base from the roof, but the signal was weak and intermittent. He was able to transmit their coordinates and situation before the connection was lost entirely. "Base copies our situation," Jake reported, "but weather's moving in from the west. Extraction helicopter can't launch until conditions improve." The weather had been clear when they inserted, but Marcus could see dark clouds building over the mountains. In this region, weather could change rapidly and dramatically, often grounding aircraft for hours, or even days. They were truly on their own. The hostiles probed their defenses throughout the morning, testing different approaches and trying to identify weaknesses in their position. Tommy's precise shooting kept them at distance, but ammunition was becoming a serious concern. Derek used his electronic equipment to monitor enemy communications, discovering that they were coordinating their attacks using handheld radios on frequencies that suggested military or paramilitary training. "They're calling in reinforcements," Derek reported after intercepting several transmissions. "Sounds like additional personnel are en route from another location." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. More hostiles meant their ammunition shortage would become critical even sooner. Marcus began considering options for breaking out of their defensive position and fighting their way to the extraction point. Elena treated a minor shrapnel wound that Jake sustained when rifle fire shattered a window near his position. The injury wasn't serious, but it demonstrated how precarious their situation had become. As the day progressed, the hostiles became bolder in their attacks. They had clearly assessed his team's capabilities and were adjusting their tactics accordingly. Marcus realized they were facing experienced fighters who understood small unit tactics and weren't going to make the kind of mistakes that would allow 5 soldiers to defeat a much larger force. The first serious assault came just after noon. Coordinated fire from multiple positions forced his team away from the windows while several hostiles attempted to breach the ground floor entrance. Derek's breaching charge, detonated at precisely the right moment, eliminated that threat, but also announced to everyone in the complex that his team was well armed and prepared to fight. Tommy continued to pick off targets when opportunities presented themselves, but the hostiles had learned to respect his capabilities and were no longer providing easy shots. His ammunition count was dropping steadily. By mid-afternoon, the situation had reached a critical point. The hostiles had effectively surrounded their building and were maintaining constant pressure from multiple directions. Marcus's team had successfully defended their position, but they couldn't maintain this indefinitely. Jake managed another brief radio contact with Phoenix Base, learning that the weather front was larger than initially predicted and would likely prevent helicopter operations until the following morning at the earliest. 20 hours minimum until extraction, Jake reported grimly. Marcus did the math. At their current rate of ammunition expenditure, they would run out of rounds long before dawn. They needed a new strategy, something that would either eliminate the hostile threat entirely or create an opportunity to escape from their increasingly desperate situation. The answer, when it came to him, was both simple and terrifying. It would require perfect timing, exceptional marksmanship, and a level of tactical risk that went against every principle of small unit operations he had ever learned. But sometimes, when all conventional options were exhausted, unconventional solutions became the only path to survival. The plan forming in Marcus's mind was audacious beyond reason. He studied the complex layout through his binoculars, focusing on a massive cylindrical storage tank positioned at the heart of the industrial area. According to the facility schematics they'd reviewed during mission planning, that tank had once contained methane for the complex's power generation system, if any residual gas remained, and if Tommy could place a shot with surgical precision. At exactly the right moment, the resulting explosion would create chaos on a scale that might allow them to escape. The margin for error was microscopic. Too early, and they'd waste their opportunity. Too late, and they'd be overwhelmed by superior numbers. But first, they needed to survive the next few hours. The afternoon heat was becoming oppressive inside their concrete fortress. Without air conditioning and with windows they couldn't safely open, the temperature climbed steadily. Sweat stung their eyes and made equipment slippery in their hands. Elena rationed their water carefully, knowing dehydration could compromise their effectiveness faster than enemy fire. Tommy had relocated to a corner window that provided the best angle toward the storage tank, roughly 400 meters away. Through his scope, he could see additional details that hadn't been visible from ground level. Fresh piping connected the tank to several buildings, suggesting the facility's gas system might still be partially operational. "I need to know if that tank contains anything combustible," Marcus told Derek. "Can your equipment detect gas concentrations from here?" Derek unpacked his atmospheric monitoring device, a sophisticated instrument originally designed for detecting chemical weapons. After calibrating the sensors, he aimed them toward the storage area. The readings were inconclusive at this distance, but they showed trace amounts of hydrocarbon compounds in the air. "There's something there," Derek confirmed. "Could be residual methane, could be something else entirely. No way to be certain without getting closer." Jake intercepted another enemy radio transmission that chilled everyone's blood. "Reinforcements have arrived. They're talking about heavy weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, maybe mortar. They're planning a major assault just before sunset." The tactical calculus had shifted dramatically. Against small arms fire, their concrete building provided adequate protection. Against military-grade explosives, it would become their tomb. Marcus gathered his team in the stairwell, the most protected area of the building. "We have two choices," he began. "Wait here and hope extraction arrives before they bring heavy weapons to bear, or create our own opportunity." Elena checked her watch. "Sunset is in 3 hours. Even if the weather clears, extraction won't happen until tomorrow morning." "What kind of opportunity?" Jake asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Marcus outlined his plan. Tommy would attempt to detonate the storage tank, creating maximum chaos and confusion. During the resulting explosion and fire, they would fight their way to the extraction point using the disruption as cover. "The shot has to be perfect," Tommy said quietly. "If I miss, we've given away our position for nothing. If the tank doesn't explode, we're worse off than before. Can you make the shot?" Marcus asked. Tommy studied the target through his scope again. 400 meters, crosswind from the west, elevated position, moving to a stationary target. Under ideal conditions. At a shooting range, it would be challenging but manageable. Under combat stress with hostiles closing in, it became exponentially more difficult. "I can make the shot," Tommy said finally. "But I need time to calculate wind speed, atmospheric pressure, and target the most vulnerable point on the tank." Derek had been monitoring enemy communications and suddenly looked up with alarm. "They're moving the heavy weapons into position now. Sounds like they're accelerating their timeline." Through the windows they could see increased activity among the hostile forces. Groups of fighters were repositioning to firing positions that would give them better angles on the administrative building. More ominously, several individuals were setting up what appeared to be mortar tubes behind a concrete barrier. The first mortar round landed 50 meters short, sending up a geyser of dirt and debris. The explosion was deafening, and the concussion Wave rattled every window in their building. "They're ranging us," Marcus announced. "The next rounds will be closer." The second mortar round struck the parking lot adjacent to their building, showering their position with fragments of asphalt and concrete. Shrapnel peppered the exterior walls, and dust filled the air inside their defensive position. Tommy was calculating wind speed using debris patterns from the explosions when the third mortar round hit the building's eastern wall. The impact shook the entire structure, and chunks of concrete crashed down from the ceiling. "We're out of time," Marcus declared. "Walsh, take the shot when ready. Everyone else, prepare for immediate exfiltration." Elena packed her medical supplies into a compact kit that could be carried while running. Jake secured the radio to his equipment harness and confirmed their compass heading to the extraction point. Derek armed his remaining breaching charges and distributed them among the team. Tommy settled into his firing position, controlling his breathing and heart rate through techniques learned in sniper school. Through his scope, the storage tank seemed both impossibly distant and remarkably clear. He could see welded seams, access hatches, and pressure relief valves that might provide the precise target he needed. The fourth mortar round struck their building directly, blowing out windows on the second floor and filling the interior with choking dust. The structural damage was becoming serious. Another direct hit might bring down entire sections of the building. "Target acquired," Tommy announced with supernatural calm. "Ready to fire on your command." Marcus moved to a position where he could observe both the storage tank and the disposition of enemy forces. The hostiles had positioned themselves to prevent any escape attempts, but they were also concentrated in areas that would be directly affected by an explosion at the tank. "Fire," Marcus commanded. The rifle shot was barely audible over the ambient noise of the ongoing battle. Tommy's bullet traveled the 400 meters in less than half a second, striking a pressure relief valve on the storage tank with perfect precision. For a moment that seemed to last forever, nothing happened. Marcus began to fear the tank was empty, that their desperate gambit had failed completely. Then the storage tank erupted in a ball of fire that illuminated the entire complex. The explosion was far larger than anyone had anticipated, sending a mushroom cloud of orange flame and black smoke hundreds of feet into the air. The concussion wave shattered windows throughout the facility and knocked several hostiles to the ground. Secondary explosions followed as the fire spread through the connected piping system. Other storage tanks detonated in sequence, creating a chain reaction that turned the entire central area of the complex into an inferno. The sound was indescribable, a continuous thunderclap that seemed to shake the earth itself. But the explosion had done more than create chaos. It had severed the pipeline that supplied the complex's backup generators, plunging several buildings into darkness. More importantly, it had ignited a massive fuel depot that the reconnaissance photos had failed to identify, creating a fire that would burn for hours and generate smoke visible for miles. The hostiles were in complete disarray. Many had been knocked unconscious by the concussion waves. Others were fleeing the fire, abandoning their weapons and equipment. Those who remained combat effective were focused on the massive fire rather than maintaining their siege of the administrative building. "Move!" Marcus shouted over the roar of the flames. They descended to the ground floor and breached the rear exit using Derek's charges. The backside of the building faced away from the main fire, providing concealment as they began their escape toward the extraction point. Jake attempted to raise Phoenix Base on the radio, hoping the massive fire might serve as a signal beacon, visible even through the weather. The smoke column was climbing thousands of feet into the air, surely visible from satellite imagery if nothing else. Elena provided covering fire as they moved between buildings, her medical training having included extensive combat marksmanship. Derek used his remaining explosives to create obstacles for any pursuing hostiles, collapsing doorways and blocking access routes behind them. Tommy continued to engage targets of opportunity, his remaining ammunition carefully conserved for the most critical threats. Each shot was precisely placed, eliminating hostiles who might organize pursuit or call in their position to reinforcements. The extraction point lay 800 meters away across increasingly open terrain. As they moved farther from the complex's buildings, concealment became more difficult and their exposure to enemy fire increased proportionally. Jake finally managed to establish radio contact with Phoenix Base. The massive explosion had been visible even through the storm clouds, and helicopter crews were already spinning up for immediate extraction despite marginal weather conditions. Phoenix Base, this is Recon Alpha. Emergency extraction required immediately. We are moving to LZ now, under hostile fire. The response was immediate and reassuring. Recon Alpha, Phoenix Base copies. Extraction helicopter is airborne, ETA 12 minutes. Maintain your current heading and prepare for hot extraction. 12 minutes felt like an eternity when measured against their dwindling ammunition and the growing organization of hostile pursuit. The explosion had bought them precious time, but professional fighters would recover quickly from the initial shock and resume their mission. Behind them, the fire continued to spread through the complex, creating a backdrop of smoke and flame that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The tactical situation was improving with each step toward the extraction point, but they weren't safe yet. Marcus could hear vehicles starting up in the distance, suggesting that at least some of the hostiles had maintained their transportation and were preparing to pursue. Their head start was significant, but not insurmountable if the enemy had access to motorized transport. The terrain between the complex and the landing zone consisted of rolling hills covered with sparse vegetation. It provided some concealment for their movement, but also created opportunities for ambush if hostiles managed to get ahead of their position. Alina spotted movement on their left, flanked 3 hostiles attempting to intercept their route to the extraction point. Tommy engaged immediately, dropping 2 targets with precision shots that echoed across the landscape. The 3rd hostile took cover behind a rocky outcropping and returned fire with an assault rifle. Derek flanked the position and eliminated the threat with his sidearm, but the engagement had cost them valuable time and revealed their location to any other hostiles in the area. In the distance, they could hear the distinctive sound of rotor blades cutting through the air. Their extraction was approaching, but so were the sounds of vehicular pursuit from the complex behind them. The race was on. The helicopter appeared as a dark silhouette against the storm clouds, flying low and fast toward their position. Marcus could see the door gunners at their stations, weapons trained on the surrounding terrain as they searched for threats to the extraction. Behind them, dust clouds marked the approach of hostile vehicles across the complex's access roads. At least 2 trucks were racing to intercept them before the helicopter could complete the pickup, their occupants likely armed with the same military-grade weapons that had made their defensive position untenable. Tommy found a shooting position on a small ridge that overlooked the final approach to the landing zone. With only 18 rounds remaining, every shot had to count. Through his scope, he could see the lead truck bouncing across the rough terrain, its driver pushing the vehicle to dangerous speeds in an attempt to reach the extraction point first. "Contact. Rear," Elena called out, spotting muzzle flashes from the complex. Several hostiles on foot were pursuing them, using the smoke from the ongoing fire as concealment. They were too far away to pose an immediate threat, but their advance suggested a coordinated effort to prevent the extraction. Derek deployed his final breaching charge as an improvised explosive device, rigging it to detonate when the pursuing vehicles reached a natural choke point between 2 rocky outcroppings. The explosion might not stop them entirely, but it would slow their advance and potentially disable one of the trucks. Jake maintained constant communication with the helicopter crew, providing updates on friendly positions and known threats. Phoenix Actual, We have two vehicles approaching from the southeast, approximately 600 meters out. Multiple dismounted hostiles following on foot. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through the radio with professional calm. Copy all threats, Recon Alpha. We'll come in hot and fast. Prepare for immediate departure. We won't be able to linger. Marcus calculated distances and timing with the precision of a mathematics professor solving a complex equation. The helicopter would reach the landing zone in approximately 90 seconds. The hostile vehicles would arrive within 2 minutes unless something slowed their advance. His team needed those crucial 30 seconds to board the aircraft and escape. Tommy's rifle cracked again, the bullet finding its mark in the lead truck's front tire. The vehicle swerved violently, rolled twice, and came to rest on its side in a cloud of dust and debris. The occupants crawled from the wreckage, some clearly injured, but others still combat effective and determined to continue the pursuit. The second truck adjusted its route to avoid the wreckage, but this detour brought it directly into the path of Derek's improvised explosive. The detonation lifted the front end of the vehicle completely off the ground, sending it cartwheeling through the air. Before it crashed back to earth in a twisted mass of metal and flames, the helicopter flared dramatically as it approached the landing zone, its rotors whipping dust and debris into a blinding storm. The crew chief was already positioned at the door, scanning the perimeter for threats while preparing to assist with the extraction. Elena reached the aircraft first, diving through the open door as rifle rounds from the pursuing dismounted hostiles began impacting the ground around the landing zone. She immediately turned to provide covering fire for her teammates, her medical training forgotten in favor of basic survival instincts. Jake followed, his radio equipment clanging against the helicopter's metal floor as he rolled inside. He continued, coordinating with the pilot even while under fire, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Derek sprinted across the open ground toward the helicopter, but a burst of automatic weapons fire forced him to take cover behind a boulder. 30 meters from the aircraft, he was pinned down by at least 3 hostiles who had reached effective range and were concentrating their fire on his position. Tommy shifted his aim from the distant vehicles to the immediate threats engaging Derek. His 16th shot dropped a hostile who had been advancing on Derek's position. His 17th eliminated another target that was attempting to flank the landing zone. Marcus realized they had seconds before the helicopter would be forced to depart with or without his complete team. The pilot couldn't risk his aircraft and crew indefinitely, and enemy fire was already striking the fuselage with increasing frequency. "Chun, move now!" Marcus shouted over the roar of the rotors. Derek broke from cover and sprinted toward the helicopter in a zigzag pattern designed to complicate enemy targeting. Rifle rounds kicked up dirt around his feet, but he reached the aircraft and dove through the door just as the pilot began lifting off. Tommy was running toward the helicopter when a burst of gunfire from the rocky terrain above caught him in the leg. He stumbled, regained his footing, and continued moving despite the wound, but his pace was noticeably slower. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for years afterward. Instead of boarding the helicopter immediately, he jumped back out and ran toward Tommy's position, providing covering fire with his assault rifle as his wounded teammates struggled across the final 50 meters. The helicopter crew chief was screaming into his headset, trying to coordinate with the pilot while laying down suppressive fire with his door-mounted machine gun. The aircraft was taking hits from multiple directions, and warning lights were beginning to illuminate on the instrument panel. Elena watched in horror as Marcus helped Tommy toward the aircraft, both men now exposed in the open ground with limited cover available. She grabbed Jake's rifle and began engaging targets systematically, her marksmanship training from basic medical corps instruction proving surprisingly effective. Tommy collapsed 10 meters from the helicopter, his leg wound more serious than initially apparent. Blood was soaking through his uniform, and his face had taken on the pale color that Alina recognized as the onset of shock. Marcus hauled his teammate to his feet and half-carried, half-dragged him the remaining distance to the aircraft. The helicopter was already lifting off when they reached the door, forcing them to grab onto the landing skids as the aircraft gained altitude. Jake and Derek pulled them inside as the helicopter climbed rapidly away from the landing zone. Alina immediately began treating Tommy's wound, her medical supplies limited, but her training comprehensive. The bullet had missed the major arteries, but had caused significant muscle damage and bone fractures. Below them, the complex continued to burn in a massive conflagration that would be visible for miles. Secondary explosions continued as the fire reached additional fuel and chemical storage areas, creating a scene that resembled a war zone more than an industrial facility. Helicopter pilot's voice came through their headsets as they gained altitude and distance from the threat area. Phoenix Base, this is Angel Flight. Package recovered successfully. 5 souls on board, 1 requiring immediate medical attention. Request priority landing and medical team standing by. Tommy remained conscious throughout the flight, his snipers' discipline helping him manage the pain and shock of his wounds. Did we get good intelligence? He asked Alina as she worked on his leg. Marcus answered before Alina could respond. Intelligence doesn't matter. We all made it home. The debrief at Phoenix Base 3 days later revealed the true scope of what they had discovered. Sector 7 hadn't been abandoned at all. It had been converted into a major staging area for a planned attack on coalition forces in the region. The explosion had destroyed millions of dollars worth of equipment and weapons, setting back hostile operations by months. Colonel Harrison reviewed their mission report with obvious satisfaction. Intelligence estimates suggest your actions prevented a coordinated attack that could have cost hundreds of coalition lives. The explosion you triggered was visible from satellite imagery and prompted immediate follow-up operations that captured significant intelligence about enemy capabilities. But Marcus found little satisfaction in the strategic success. He kept thinking about how close they had come to not making it home, how many small decisions and lucky breaks had been necessary for their survival. Tommy recovered completely from his wounds and returned to duty 6 weeks later, though he walked with a slight limp that would stay with him permanently. He never spoke about the shot that had saved their lives, but Marcus noticed that he cleaned his rifle with even more obsessive attention to detail than before. Alina was promoted to sergeant and eventually became the senior medic for their battalion. She credited the Sector 7 mission with teaching her that medical personnel needed to be prepared for any situation, regardless of their primary assignment. Derek received a commendation for his innovative use of explosives and electronic warfare techniques. He later transferred to a specialized unit that focused on unconventional tactics and asymmetric warfare. Jake's communication skills during the extraction earned him recognition from division headquarters and a position as a communications instructor. At the Army's Advanced Training Facility, Marcus was awarded the Silver Star for his leadership during the mission, though he always felt the real heroes were his teammates who had performed their duties under impossible circumstances. The citation mentioned his decision to risk his own safety to ensure Tommy's evacuation, but Marcus never considered it heroic, just what any leader should do for his people. Years later, when Marcus had returned to civilian life and was working as a security consultant, he would sometimes tell clients about the importance of preparation and adaptability in crisis situations. He would describe how a routine reconnaissance mission had become a desperate fight for survival, and how success had depended on every team member performing beyond their normal capabilities. But he never told them about the single shot that had changed everything, or about the split-second decision to target a storage tank that might or might not have contained explosive gas. Some stories, he felt, were too close to impossible to be believable. The truth was that survival often came down to a combination of training, teamwork, and pure luck, and sometimes, When all conventional options were exhausted, the willingness to attempt something that bordered on insane. In Sector 7, surrounded by hostiles with superior numbers and firepower. That combination had been just enough to bring everyone home alive. The investigation began immediately after their helicopter touched down at Phoenix Base. While Elena rushed Tommy to the medical facility, intelligence officers were already analyzing the photographs and data Derek had collected during their reconnaissance. What they discovered in those digital files would reshape coalition understanding of enemy capabilities in the entire theater of operations. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the base intelligence officer, spread the reconnaissance photos across her desk. In the secure briefing room, each image told part of a larger story that no one had suspected. The industrial complex wasn't just being used as a staging area. It was a sophisticated manufacturing facility, producing improvised explosive devices and other weapons on an industrial scale. "Look at this," Mitchell said, pointing to Derek's photographs of the warehouse interiors. "Those aren't just storage areas, they're assembly lines." Someone invested serious money and expertise into converting this facility for weapons production. The chemical residue Derek's sensors had detected wasn't just explosive material. It was evidence of a complex supply chain that connected the facility to networks spanning multiple countries. The professional-grade electrical work they had observed supported high-precision manufacturing equipment capable of producing military-grade ordnance. General Patricia Hawkins arrived from regional headquarters within 18 hours of their extraction. As the commanding officer responsible for counterinsurgency operations across 3 provinces, she understood the strategic implications of their discovery better than anyone. "This changes everything," Hawkins announced during the emergency briefing. "We weren't dealing with a local cell or even a regional network. This was infrastructure for a major operation that could have supplied hostile forces across the entire sector." The satellite imagery analysts had been working continuously since the explosion, using high-resolution cameras to document the destruction and identify patterns that might reveal additional sites. The fire had burned for 14 hours before finally consuming most of the available fuel, leaving behind a wasteland of twisted metal and concrete that would serve as a monument to the scale of the operation. Marcus found himself at the center of an investigation that extended far beyond their original mission parameters. Intelligence teams wanted to know every detail of what they had observed, every conversation they had overheard, every piece of equipment they had seen. The debriefing sessions lasted for days, with specialists from various agencies asking increasingly technical questions about things he barely understood. Tommy's recovery became a source of fascination for the medical staff. The bullet wound had been serious enough to require surgical repair, but his remarkably calm demeanor throughout the treatment impressed everyone involved. Dr. Angela Foster, the base surgeon, noted that Tommy's vital signs had remained stable even during the most painful procedures. Most soldiers in his condition would be showing significant signs of trauma response, Dr. Foster explained to Marcus during one of his visits to the medical ward. "This young man's psychological resilience is extraordinary. He keeps asking when he can return to duty rather than dwelling on the injury itself." Elena spent her off-duty hours at Tommy's bedside, partly from concern for her teammate, but also from professional curiosity about wound treatment techniques. The surgical team had used advanced procedures that weren't typically available at forward operating bases, giving her insights into trauma care that would prove valuable in future missions. Derek's technical expertise became increasingly valuable as analysts tried to understand the sophisticated equipment they had destroyed. His engineering background allowed him to interpret the photographs in ways that revealed manufacturing capabilities and supply chain requirements that intelligence specialists might have missed. The electrical systems weren't just professionally installed, Derek explained during one briefing session. They were designed for precision manufacturing. Someone with serious technical knowledge planned this conversion, probably months or years in advance. Jake's communication intercepts proved crucial for understanding the enemy's organizational structure. The radio transmissions he had recorded contained references to operations and personnel that extended the investigation into multiple intelligence databases. Patterns emerged that connected the Sector 7 facility to previously unexplained activities. Across the region, the broader implications continued to unfold as intelligence analysts connected their discovery to other seemingly unrelated incidents. Attacks that had appeared random or opportunistic suddenly revealed themselves as parts of a coordinated campaign that the weapons facility had been designed to support. Colonel Harrison convened a classified briefing for senior officers throughout the region, using their mission as a case study for identifying similar facilities that might be operating under cover of legitimate industrial activity. The lessons learned from Sector 7 would influence reconnaissance procedures and target analysis protocols for years to come. But the personal impact on Marcus and his team proved more complex than the strategic victories. Each member of the squad processed their experience differently, revealing aspects of character that hadn't been apparent during routine operations. Tommy's philosophical approach to his injury surprised everyone who knew his typically focused personality. During his recovery, he spent hours reading military history and tactical analysis, seeking to understand how other soldiers had dealt with similar situations throughout history. "Every mission teaches you something," Tommy told Marcus during one of their conversations in the medical ward. "This one taught me that preparation and training can only take you so far. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and hope they're right." Elena discovered that her medical training had been more comprehensive than she had realized. The combination of combat stress and patient care had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. She began studying advanced trauma procedures, determined to be better prepared for future situations where medical and combat skills might be equally important. Derek's fascination with the technical aspects of their mission led him to research unconventional uses for standard military equipment. His improvised explosive devices had proven remarkably effective, but he wanted to understand the theoretical principles that could guide similar innovations in future situations. Jake's communication skills had literally saved their lives, but the experience also showed him how critical accurate information could be during crisis situations. He began studying intelligence analysis techniques, seeking to understand how tactical communication fit into broader strategic planning. Marcus found himself questioning assumptions about leadership that he had never examined before. The decision to risk his own safety for Tommy's evacuation had been instinctive, but the consequences could have been catastrophic for the entire team. Balancing individual welfare against mission success presented ethical challenges that military training didn't always address clearly. The medals and commendation ceremony took place 6 weeks after their return, with General Hawkins personally presenting awards to each team member. The event attracted attention from military journalists and defense analysts who wanted to understand how a routine reconnaissance mission had uncovered such a significant threat. But Marcus noticed that none of his teammates seemed particularly interested in the public recognition. They were more focused on preparing for their next assignment, integrating the lessons learned from Sector 7 into their standard operating procedures. The psychological evaluation reports noted that all 5 team members showed remarkable resilience and adaptability. Dr. James Carpenter, the base psychologist, attributed their successful adaptation to the strong interpersonal bonds they had developed and their shared sense of accomplishment. Groups that survive extreme stress together often emerge stronger than before, Dr. Carpenter explained. These individuals demonstrated that effective teamwork can overcome seemingly impossible odds, which reinforces their confidence in future challenging situations. The intelligence community's analysis of the Sector 7 discovery continued for months. revealing connections that extended across international borders and involved networks that had been operating undetected for years. The destruction of the facility had disrupted plans that could have resulted in casualties numbering in the hundreds or thousands. Regional commanders began implementing new protocols for investigating supposedly abandoned facilities using Marcus's team's experience as a template for recognizing signs of hostile activity. The combination of careful observation, technical analysis, and aggressive response became a model for similar operations throughout the theater. Tommy returned to full duty with a slight limp that he refused to acknowledge and marksmanship scores that impressed even veteran instructors. His experience with the critical shot at the storage tank had given him confidence in high-pressure situations that translated into exceptional performance during training exercises. Elena's medical skills earned her a position with a specialized unit that provided advanced trauma care in forward areas. Her combination of combat experience and technical expertise made her invaluable for situations where traditional medical support wasn't available. Derek's engineering innovations attracted attention from research and development specialists who were interested in his approaches to improvised solutions. His ability to adapt standard equipment for unconventional purposes became part of the curriculum at advanced training facilities. Jake's communication expertise led to his selection for an intelligence liaison position that required coordination between multiple agencies and international partners. His experience managing critical information under extreme stress qualified him for assignments involving sensitive diplomatic and military coordination. Marcus accepted a promotion that placed him in charge of training reconnaissance teams for similar high-risk missions. His first-hand experience with the challenges of operating in hostile territory made him uniquely qualified to prepare other soldiers for situations where conventional tactics might not be sufficient. Years later, when military historians analyzed the broader campaign against insurgent networks in the region, the Sector 7 mission would be recognized as a turning point that prevented a coordinated offensive capable of changing the strategic balance. But for the 5 soldiers who lived through it, the mission's significance remained personal rather than historical. They had faced impossible odds, made split-second decisions with life or death consequences, and discovered that survival often depended on factors beyond training or equipment. The experience had taught them that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act effectively despite overwhelming uncertainty. Most importantly, they had learned that no individual achievement mattered as much as bringing everyone home safely. 3 months after Sector 7, Marcus received orders that would test everything he had learned about unconventional warfare. Intelligence had identified 7 additional facilities across the region, showing similar patterns to the destroyed complex. Each site required specialized reconnaissance teams, capable of operating independently behind enemy lines for extended periods. The new mission parameters were unlike anything in standard military doctrine. Teams would insert at night, establish concealed observation posts, and conduct surveillance for up to 2 weeks before extraction. The goal wasn't just intelligence gathering. They needed to develop detailed assault plans that conventional forces could execute with minimal casualties. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Stone, newly assigned as the Regional Special Operations Commander, had specifically requested Marcus for the planning phase. Her reputation for innovative tactics and aggressive leadership had earned respect throughout the special operations community, but her methods sometimes pushed the boundaries of acceptable risk. The enemy learned from Sector 7, Stone explained. During their first briefing at the secure facility outside Kabul, they've adapted their security protocols and operational patterns. What worked before won't work again. We need teams that can think creatively under pressure. The intelligence package for the new targets was both more comprehensive and more troubling than anything they had seen previously. Satellite imagery showed facilities that appeared completely legitimate from overhead surveillance, but electronic intelligence suggested sophisticated manufacturing operations hidden beneath innocuous industrial covers. Tommy had requested assignment to Marcus's new team despite his recent injury and the availability of safer positions. His experience with precision shooting under extreme stress made him invaluable for missions where a single shot might determine success or failure. "I'm not looking for revenge or redemption," Tommy explained when Marcus questioned his decision. "I'm looking to prevent other teams from facing the same situation we did. Experience matters more than perfect physical condition." Elena had completed advanced medical training that qualified her for deep reconnaissance missions, where traditional medical support would be unavailable for days or weeks. Her combination of combat experience and enhanced medical skills made her one of the most sought-after medics in the theater. Derek's innovations with improvised devices had attracted attention from research specialists who equipped him with experimental technologies designed specifically for reconnaissance and sabotage operations. His engineering background combined with his creativity made him ideal for missions requiring adaptive solutions to unpredictable challenges. Jake's communication expertise had expanded to include electronic warfare capabilities that could disrupt enemy communications while maintaining covert contact with friendly forces. His role had evolved from simple radio operation to comprehensive information warfare support. The first target facility was located in a mountainous region near the Pakistani border, disguised as a mining operation that had been abandoned due to geological instability. Intelligence indicated that the site was actually producing sophisticated, radio-controlled explosive devices capable of penetrating armored vehicles. The insertion went flawlessly, with the team parachuting into a remote valley under cover of darkness and hiking 12 kilometers to their observation position. The terrain was brutal rocky slopes covered with loose scree that made silent movement nearly impossible, combined with altitude that left everyone breathing hard despite excellent physical conditioning. Their concealed observation post overlooked the mining facility from a position that provided excellent surveillance coverage while remaining invisible to casual observation. Derek's electronic equipment immediately detected sophisticated communication networks and power consumption patterns that contradicted the site's supposed abandonment. "This facility is consuming more electricity than some small cities," Derek reported after analyzing the power grid signatures. "Whatever they're doing requires industrial-scale manufacturing equipment." Tommy established shooting positions that covered multiple escape routes and potential target areas within the facility. His calculations included factors like altitude, temperature variations, and seasonal wind patterns that could affect accuracy across the distances involved. Elena set up a medical station that could handle everything from minor injuries to major trauma, knowing that evacuation would be impossible if someone was seriously wounded during the 2-week surveillance period. Her supplies included experimental medications and treatment protocols designed specifically for extended isolation missions. Jake deployed communication equipment that could maintain contact with headquarters while intercepting and analyzing enemy transmissions. His electronic warfare capabilities allowed him to monitor enemy security procedures without revealing their own presence. The facility's security proved more sophisticated than expected. Regular patrols followed unpredictable patterns designed to detect surveillance attempts, and electronic countermeasures suggested that the operators understood modern reconnaissance techniques. This wasn't a hastily converted industrial site. It was a purpose-built facility designed from the beginning to avoid detection. Marcus documented guard rotations, vehicle movements, and personnel patterns that revealed the true scope of the operation. The number of workers entering and leaving the facility suggested a manufacturing capability that could produce hundreds of devices per month, enough to supply hostile operations across multiple provinces. On the 4th day, they observed a convoy arriving with raw materials that Derek's sensors identified as military-grade explosives and electronic components. The sophistication of the supply chain indicated connections to state-level sponsors rather than purely criminal or terrorist organizations. Tommy spotted something through his scope that changed their understanding of the threat entirely. Among the personnel entering the facility were individuals wearing uniforms consistent with foreign military advisors, suggesting that enemy operations had reached a level of international support that regional commanders hadn't anticipated. Elena noticed behavioral patterns among the facility workers that indicated military or paramilitary training rather than typical industrial employment. The way they moved, maintained security, and responded to potential threats suggested a level of professionalism that elevated the threat assessment significantly. Jake's electronic intercepts revealed communication protocols that matched patterns associated with advanced military organizations. The enemy wasn't just manufacturing weapons, they were coordinating operations across a network that spanned international borders and involved sophisticated planning capabilities. Derek's analysis of the facility's technical infrastructure revealed manufacturing capabilities that could produce electronic devices matching the sophistication of military-grade equipment. The implications were staggering. Enemy forces had access to technology that could neutralize many coalition advantages. On the seventh day, Marcus made a discovery that forced him to reconsider everything they thought they knew about enemy capabilities. Hidden beneath the mining facility's cover was a communications center that appeared to be coordinating operations across the entire region. This wasn't just a manufacturing site, it was a command and control facility. The intelligence value of their surveillance had exceeded all expectations, but it also created new challenges. The facility was too important to destroy through conventional assault, but too dangerous to leave operational. Any attack would need to capture rather than destroy the command infrastructure while neutralizing the manufacturing capability. Tommy identified potential shooting positions that could support a complex assault involving multiple teams and precise timing. His analysis included calculations for suppressing key defensive positions while avoiding damage to critical intelligence assets. Elena developed medical support plans for casualties that might result from a large-scale assault operation. Her preparations included coordination with helicopter medical evacuation teams and advanced trauma treatment protocols for potentially dozens of wounded personnel. Derek designed electronic warfare plans that could disrupt enemy communications during an assault while preserving the intelligence infrastructure for capture and analysis. His approach required sophisticated timing and technical precision that pushed the limits of available equipment. Jake created communication plans that could coordinate simultaneous operations across multiple facilities while maintaining operational security and avoiding electronic detection by enemy countermeasures. His role had evolved to encompass comprehensive information operations rather than simple radio communication. Marcus realized that their reconnaissance mission had uncovered a threat that required resources far beyond what their small team could address. The facility represented a strategic target that would require battalion-level operations involving air support, armor, and specialized assault teams. But intelligence also indicated that the enemy was planning to relocate the operation within days, potentially moving the command infrastructure to a location that might never be discovered. Any response would need to be immediate and decisive, executed before the window of opportunity closed permanently. The decision to recommend immediate assault operations represented a calculated risk that could result in either a major strategic victory or a catastrophic intelligence failure. Success would cripple enemy operations across the region, but failure would alert hostile forces to coalition intelligence capabilities and trigger security measures that could make future operations impossible. Marcus encrypted his recommendations and transmitted them through Jake's secure communication systems. Knowing that senior commanders would face the same impossible choices that had defined their experience at Sector 7. Sometimes military success required decisions that balanced certain risks against uncertain opportunities. The response came within hours. Prepared detailed assault plans for immediate execution, with operations commencing at dawn in 48 hours. Multiple special operations teams would converge on 7 facilities simultaneously, supported by air power and conventional forces positioned to prevent enemy escape or reinforcement. The scope of the operation exceeded anything attempted in the theater previously, involving hundreds of personnel and requiring coordination across multiple agencies and international partners. Success would depend on the reconnaissance intelligence Marcus's team had gathered, making their observation mission critical to outcomes affecting regional security for years to come. As they prepared to support the upcoming assault, Marcus reflected on how their experience at Sector 7 had led to this moment. One shot had indeed silenced a threat, but it had also revealed the existence of threats far larger than anyone had imagined. The war was far from over. Dawn broke over the Hindu Kush mountains with an eerie stillness that Marcus had learned to associate with impending combat. Across 7 locations spanning 3 provinces, special operations teams were moving into final assault positions for the largest coordinated strike in the theater's history. Everything they had discovered at Sector 7 had led to this moment. The command center at Bagram Air Base hummed with controlled intensity as General Hawkins monitored operations that would simultaneously target the entire enemy network. Real-time intelligence from Marcus's team and 6 other reconnaissance units provided targeting data for precision strikes that needed to capture rather than destroy critical infrastructure. Major General David Thornton, the theater's special operations commander, had flown in from Tampa specifically to oversee the operation. His presence indicated the strategic importance coalition leadership placed on dismantling the network that Marcus's team had first uncovered in that abandoned industrial complex months earlier. Operation Sledgehammer is a go, Thornton announced at precisely 0600 hours. All teams have authorization to engage their targets simultaneously. Priority remains intelligence preservation and personnel capture. Marcus watched through his scope as Apache helicopters appeared over the ridgeline surrounding their target facility. The mining operation that had concealed sophisticated manufacturing and command capabilities was about to face the full weight of American military technology and training. Tommy had positioned himself to provide overwatch for the assault team approaching from the east. His rifle was loaded with specialized ammunition designed to penetrate body armor while minimizing collateral damage to nearby equipment. Every shot needed to be precise enough to neutralize threats without destroying intelligence assets. Elena had established a forward aid station, equipped with the most advanced trauma care equipment available outside a hospital setting. Medical helicopters were standing by for immediate evacuation, but her job was to keep casualties alive long enough for transport to definitive care. Derek's electronic warfare equipment was already disrupting enemy communications while preserving the command infrastructure for intelligence exploitation. His real-time analysis of enemy electronic signatures guided the assault teams toward high-value targets while avoiding booby traps and defensive positions. Jake coordinated communications between 7 assault teams, helicopter units, fixed-wing aircraft, and the Joint Operations Center. His responsibilities had expanded to include real-time intelligence fusion that allowed commanders to adapt their plans based on developments across all target locations. The first explosions echoed across the valley as breaching charges opened access points that Derek had identified during their surveillance. Assault teams poured through the openings with practiced efficiency, moving toward objectives that Marcus's reconnaissance had precisely mapped and prioritized. Tommy's first shot dropped a sniper who had emerged on the facility's main tower, preventing him from engaging the assault teams. crossing open ground toward the manufacturing buildings. His second shot eliminated a machine gunner attempting to establish a defensive position at a critical choke point, but the enemy response revealed capabilities that exceeded even their comprehensive intelligence preparation. Hidden defensive positions that hadn't appeared in any surveillance suddenly came alive with coordinated fire that forced the assault teams to take cover and reassess their approach. Elena found herself treating a wounded Special Forces medic who had been hit by fragments from an improvised explosive device that the enemy had somehow concealed from Derek's electronic detection systems. The wounds were serious but manageable, demonstrating the value of having multiple medical specialists supporting the operation. Derek detected electronic signatures indicating that the enemy was attempting to destroy critical intelligence assets before they could be captured. His countermeasures prevented most of the data destruction, but some files were irretrievably lost before he could complete his electronic intervention. Jake received reports from other target locations indicating mixed results across the operation. 3 facilities had been secured with minimal resistance, but 2 others were presenting organized defense that suggested the enemy had anticipated coalition response and prepared accordingly. Marcus realized that their target facility represented the most heavily defended position in the entire network. The enemy had concentrated their most experienced fighters and sophisticated equipment at the location that housed their regional command infrastructure. What should have been a quick assault was becoming a sustained battle. The Apache helicopters provided close air support that suppressed enemy defensive positions, but the rocky terrain and proximity of intelligence assets limited the use of heavy weapons. Precision became more important than firepower, requiring individual marksmanship and small unit tactics rather than overwhelming technological superiority. Tommy shifted his position to engage targets that were threatening to flank the main assault force. His mobility and accuracy proved crucial for preventing enemy fighters from establishing crossfire positions that could have pinned down the coalition forces in kill zones. Elena coordinated medical evacuation for casualties from multiple teams as the intensity of combat exceeded initial projections. Her ability to perform advanced trauma care under fire kept seriously wounded personnel alive long enough for helicopter transport to surgical facilities. Derek's electronic warfare expanded beyond communications disruption to include active measures that confused enemy coordination and prevented them from effectively employing their defensive preparations. His real-time adaptation to changing tactical situations demonstrated the value of technical expertise in modern combat. Jake maintained communication with higher headquarters while coordinating close air support and medical evacuation requests. His information management prevented the confusion that could have resulted from multiple teams operating simultaneously in complex terrain with overlapping responsibilities. The breakthrough came when Marcus identified a vulnerability in the perforce terrain with overlapping responsibilities. The breakthrough came when Marcus identified a vulnerability in the complex terrain with overlapping responsibilities. The breakthrough came when Marcus identified a vulnerability in the enemy defensive plan. A series of natural caves connected the manufacturing area to the command facility, providing concealed movement routes that the enemy was using to reinforce threatened positions. Derek, can you seal those cave entrances without bringing down the entire mountain? Marcus asked while engaging targets trying to establish new defensive positions. Derek analyzed the geological structure, using seismic data from his electronic equipment. I can collapse specific sections, but timing will be critical. We need to ensure our people are clear of the blast zones. The plan required coordination between ground assault teams, air support, and Derek's precisely placed charges. Tommy would provide overwatch to prevent enemy interference during the critical placement phase. While Elena prepared to treat casualties that might result from close proximity explosions, Jake coordinated the complex, timing sequence with all participating units, ensuring that friendly forces would be positioned safely when Derek triggered his charges. The margin for error was minimal, but success would trap enemy fighters in isolated sections, where they could be neutralized without risking critical intelligence assets. Marcus led a small team through the cave system to reach the placement points for Derek's charges. The underground movement was treacherous, requiring night vision equipment and careful navigation through passages that could easily become death traps if the enemy detected their approach. Tommy maintained overwatch on the cave entrances, preventing enemy fighters from interfering with the placement operation, while providing early warning of any attempts to escape through alternative routes. His position allowed him to cover multiple approaches simultaneously. Elena established a casualty collection point at the cave entrance, prepared to treat anyone who might be injured during the underground operation. Her medical equipment included specialized supplies for treating injuries that might occur in confined spaces with limited evacuation options. Derek's charges were placed with surgical precision at structural points that would collapse specific passages without affecting the stability of areas containing intelligence assets. His engineering expertise proved crucial for achieving the precise effects needed to support the tactical plan. The explosions reverberated through the mountain like thunder, creating clouds of dust and debris that temporarily obscured visibility across the entire facility. When the air cleared, enemy defensive coordination had been disrupted by the isolation of their forces into separate groups that could no longer support each other. The final assault proceeded with methodical efficiency, as coalition forces cleared each separated section systematically. Enemy resistance collapsed quickly once their ability to coordinate defensive fires was eliminated by Derek's precisely executed demolitions. Tommy provided precision fire support during the final clearing operations, ensuring that coalition forces could advance safely while preserving intelligence assets and capturing enemy personnel for interrogation. His marksmanship prevented casualties that could have resulted from close-quarters combat in confined spaces. Elena treated wounded enemy personnel with the same professional care she provided to coalition casualties, demonstrating the medical ethics that distinguished professional military forces from their adversaries. Her actions also ensured that captured enemy fighters would be healthy enough for effective interrogation. Derek immediately began exploiting captured electronic equipment and intelligence assets, preserving critical data before it could be destroyed or corrupted. His technical expertise allowed intelligence specialists to access information that revealed connections to networks spanning multiple countries. Jake coordinated the intelligence exploitation with headquarters while maintaining communication with other target locations. Reports indicated that 6 of the 7 facilities had been successfully captured with varying degrees of intelligence recovery and enemy casualties. The 7th facility had been completely destroyed by its defenders before coalition forces could prevent the demolition. But the intelligence recovered from the other sites provided a comprehensive understanding of enemy capabilities and planning that would influence coalition strategy for years to come. Marcus supervised the final security sweep of their facility, while coordinating with intelligence specialists who were documenting everything from manufacturing equipment to personal communications found on captured personnel. The scope of the intelligence recovery exceeded all expectations. The operation's success became apparent as analysts began processing the captured information. The enemy network had been planning coordinated attacks that could have resulted in hundreds of coalition casualties and significant strategic setbacks. The simultaneous strikes had prevented a campaign that could have changed the course of the entire conflict. Tommy's precision shooting had been critical at multiple points during the operation, preventing enemy actions that could have compromised the mission or resulted in friendly casualties. His experience from Sector 7 had prepared him for situations where single shots determined tactical outcomes. Elena's medical expertise had saved lives across multiple teams and demonstrated the importance of advanced trauma care in complex operations. Her dual role as combat medic and tactical fighter had proven invaluable for missions where traditional medical support wasn't sufficient. Derek's technical innovations had enabled capabilities that standard military doctrine hadn't envisioned. From electronic warfare to precision demolitions, his engineering background combined with combat experience had created solutions that no single specialty could have achieved. Jake's communication and information management had held together an operation involving hundreds of personnel across vast distances and multiple time zones. His evolution from radio operator to information warfare specialist had been crucial for mission success. Marcus's leadership had guided his team through challenges that tested every aspect of their training and experience. The lessons learned from their original encounter at Sector 7 had been applied successfully to operations of much greater scope and complexity. The award ceremony 3 weeks later attracted attention from across the defense establishment. The simultaneous operations had disrupted enemy capabilities throughout the region and provided intelligence that was already influencing operations in other theaters worldwide. But for Marcus and his team, the real measure of success wasn't the strategic impact or public recognition. It was the knowledge that their actions had prevented attacks that could have killed hundreds of innocent people and fellow soldiers. Years later, when military historians analyzed the campaign against transnational terrorist networks, Operation Sledgehammer would be recognized as a turning point that demonstrated the effectiveness of intelligence-driven precision operations. The technique of using small reconnaissance teams to identify targets for larger forces became standard doctrine. Tommy eventually became an instructor at the Army's Advanced Marksmanship School, where he taught precision shooting under extreme stress conditions. His students learned not just technical skills, but the mental discipline required to make critical shots when lives depended on accuracy. Elena earned a medical degree and specialized in combat trauma care, eventually leading research into new treatment protocols for battlefield injuries. Her combination of medical training and combat experience made her a leading authority on trauma care in austere environments. Derek founded a company that developed specialized equipment for military and civilian explosive ordnance disposal teams. His innovations and improvised solutions under pressure translated into technologies that saved lives in both military and civilian applications. Jake became a senior intelligence analyst specializing in communication patterns and electronic warfare. His understanding of how information flows during crisis situations made him valuable for both military operations and civilian emergency management. Marcus eventually left military service to become a security consultant, but he continued to serve as an unofficial advisor for special operations training programs. His experience leading teams through impossible situations made him uniquely qualified to prepare others for similar challenges. They remained in contact throughout their careers, meeting annually on the anniversary of the Sector 7 mission that had started their journey together. Each gathering reinforced their understanding that success in extreme situations depended more on teamwork and mutual trust than individual heroics. The story of how hostiles had them surrounded until one shot silenced the threat became part of military folklore. But the men and women who lived it understood that the real lesson wasn't about marksmanship or tactics. It was about ordinary people who refused to abandon each other when faced with extraordinary circumstances. In a world where technology and strategy dominated military planning, their experience proved that human factors, courage, loyalty, creativity, and determination remained the ultimate weapons. No amount of equipment or training could substitute for the willingness to risk everything for teammates and mission. The shot that changed everything at Sector 7 was remembered not for its technical precision, but for what it represented: the Moment when impossible odds met unbreakable determination. And determination won. That lesson, more than any tactical innovation or strategic insight, would influence military thinking for generations to come. Sometimes the most important victories weren't won by overwhelming force or superior technology, but by individuals who refused to accept defeat when everything depended on their success. The hostiles had indeed surrounded them, but Marcus's team had discovered something their enemies never understood, that being surrounded only mattered if you planned to retreat. When retreat wasn't an option, being surrounded simply meant that every shot would find a target. And sometimes, one perfectly placed shot was enough to change the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.